Describe the important steps in muscle contraction. So students, let us learn about the various steps which are involved in the muscle contraction. So we are talking about the skeletal muscle contraction. Now this is explained by the sliding filament theory. So according to this theory, the thick filaments and the thin filaments. The thin filament slides over the thick filaments, reducing the size of the sarcomere, and as a result, the whole myofibril size will be reduced, and this is called muscle contraction. The process involves various steps. So the first step is the obtaining the signal from the nervous system. So the muscle contraction is initiated by the signal that travels along the axon and reaches a neuromuscular junction or motor end plate. So there are motor neurons which carries the information from the brain to a muscle or a gland for the contraction to take place. So when an axon of a motor neuron brings the information to a muscle cell, the muscle cell will initiate contraction. So there is a point of attachment between the muscle and the end of the axon. So this point of attachment is called neuromuscular junction. So this fine space between the end of the axon and the muscle cell is called neuromuscular junction. So that is present between the neuron and the sarcolemma of a muscle fiber. So sarcolemma means it is the plasma membrane of the muscle fiber. And this end of the axon has got a synaptic vessels containing neurotransmitters. So when the electrical impulses reaches the end of the axon, the synaptic vesicles are released into the neuromuscular junction. And this synaptic vesicle contains neurotransmitter called acetylcholine. So acetylcholines are also released, and they bind to the specific receptors present on the sarcolemma. When they bind to the specific receptor on the sarcolemma, the channels for the sodium ions will be opened, and these sodium ions enter into the muscle fiber and initiate an electrical impulse over there, which is called action potential. So action potential is generated in the muscle cell. So this action potential which is generated in the muscle cell causes the calcium ions to be released by the smooth endoplasmic reticulum which is present in the muscle fiber. The smooth endoplasmic reticulum are called sarcoplasmic reticulum. They are present in the cytoplasm of the muscle cell. The cytoplasm is called sarcoplasm. So the stored calcium ions are released into the cytoplasm. Now these calcium ions binds to a specific protein on the actin filament. The protein is troponin. So when the calcium binds to a troponin, so the calcium ions binds to troponin on the actin filament. So this binding initiates to remove the myosin binding site on the actin filament. So it will pull another protein called tropomyosin, which is hiding the myosin binding site. So when this tropomyosin are pulled apart, the myosin binding sites become free. It becomes exposed so that the myosin can bind to it. So actin sites are exposed, and this allows the myosin heads to attach to the site. In the next stage, the ATP, the myosin head, has got another binding site. One, it binds to the myosin binding site which is present on the actin filament. Another is it can bind to ATP. When an ATP binds to the myosin head, it is hydrolyzed and it is converted into ADP and inorganic phosphate, during which energy is released. So this energy is consumed for the myosin head to raise up. So once it raises up, it binds to the myosin binding site present on the actin filament, and a temporary cross bridge is formed. So this bridge connects the actin and the myosin filament. So what we learned here, an ATP was utilized to make the connection between the actin and the myosin. In the next step, another ATP will be consumed by the myosin head. So that means another ATP binds here. This will be hydrolyzed energy is released. So this energy is used to pull the myosin head forward. So when the myosin head pulls the actin into the H zone. So here we can see the myosin head pulls the actin filament into the H zone. The length of the H zone is getting reduced. And finally the H zone will disappear. So here we can see the H zone has been disappeared. As this process keeps on repeating. So in every cycle, one ATP will be used to bind to the myosin head and another ATP to pull the actin forward. So as the cycle continues, there will be shortening in the length of the H zone. So as the H zone shortens in length, the length of the sarcomere will be reduced. So this is called the contraction or the sliding theory. So after the muscle contraction, the myosin head pulls the actin filament and release ADP along with the inorganic phosphate. So this process continues further. And when the calcium level decreases, when there will be drop in the calcium level or when the signal ends, the actin troponin which is bound to the calcium separates and it will mask the binding site present on the actin filament. So the myosin binding site is hidden again and the muscle contraction will stop, and this stage is called muscle relaxation. So once the complete sarcomere has been contracted, the calcium level reduces, the calcium ion decreases, and the actin filament which was free for the binding of myosin gets masked by the tropomyosin filament, and now the muscle is said to be relaxed. So these are the various stages in which the muscle contraction occurs.